We have to look at the internet because a lot of bad things are happening to young kids and young minds, and their minds are being formed. Also, video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. And then you go the further step, and that's the movies. You see these movies, they're so violent.
The investigation into the high school massacre is slow-moving and dangerous. The two gunmen who went on the rampage booby-trapped the building and even themselves. All day long, investigators have searched the homes of both teenage killers. In one of them, police say they found bomb-making materials.
The National Rifle Association has come out to say that the real problem isn't guns, but instead violent video games.
The wall poster of the big E3 computer game show in Atlanta bears the unmistakable image of an AK-47 rifle, and it asks what went wrong. For some, the answer might be the game itself. Much of this audience, the violence is appealing.
Just something about being able to take your friend, blow its head off. It's mass mayhem.
I get under a lot of stress at work, and it's just kind of nice to go home and just get it out that way, and then I'm okay for the rest of the night.
The term going postal is the newest entry into the English lexicon for getting angry, really angry. But it grew out of a series of random, violent shootings at U.S. post offices by disgruntled employees who took out their bosses and their girlfriends in a mad rage.
Thomas Pantig and Stephen Lloyd are typical of many in their generation. Good jobs by day, obsessed with a violent so-called first-person shooter called Call of Duty when they get home. But is this just good fun, or is an entire generation being trained and desensitized to the act of shooting people?
And just some people just go crazy.
Dr. Chris Ferguson has conducted a series of multi-year studies of 11 to 18-year-olds to find out what violent games do to them.
Population pressure and the stress of modern life may cause an increase in violent tendencies. The urban environment is the incubator for all sorts of undesirable behaviors. However much his atrocities disgust us, he may actually consider himself a hero.
The Postal series is infamous, controversial, violent, and absurd. This franchise has been around since 1997, constantly pushing boundaries and making people say, how is this even allowed? Today, we're going to be going through every single Postal game made by Running with Scissors and testing my sanity. If you're watching for the first time or just unsubscribed, please subscribe. This video took me a long time and a lot of effort to put together and edit, having to sort through countless hours of footage. With that said, here it is. Postal. This is one of, if not, the most divisive franchise in gaming history. Politicians, media outlets, and even other game developers have called it out for being too violent, too offensive, and too chaotic. When Postal first dropped in 1997, it immediately landed in hot water. The game had little story, no moral compass, and just pure violence. This led to major backlash from politicians and anti-video game activists who labeled it a murder simulator. The biggest controversy? It came out right before the Columbine shooting in 1999. Even though the game had nothing to do with the tragedy, it still got lumped into the violent games cause violence debate that was raging at the time. Did it deserve the hate? Probably not, but the damage was done. Postal was officially the bad guy of gaming. This is where it all began. Postal. It's a top-down shooter where you play as the Postal Dude, a guy who is clearly having the worst day of his life. The goal? Kill everyone. That's it. Just a dude, a gun, and an entire town to tear apart. The gameplay is what you would expect from a game made in 1997. The enemies are relentless, and honestly, it's more frustrating than fun. But hey, it was the 90s. edgy, chaotic, and controversial was the marketing strategy back then. And somehow, this game did well enough to spawn a sequel that would change everything. This game has its quirks, like having to look up a very old guide to fix my controls. Postal is a game that is very on edge. I feel like a complete psychopath playing this game. Although, the game never forces you to kill civilians, they're going to be caught in the crossfire anyway. This game is a mix of terrifying and frustrating. Also, every single level in Postal 1 is terrifying, making this seem more like a horror game than anything else. You start at your house. You shoot your way through the town. You are required to kill a certain percent of enemies to progress, and this number will only keep going up the more you play. The ambient noise makes this game horrifying, and at the end of each level, you are met with eerie silence instead of gunshots. After gunning through your hometown, things only get worse. Each level throws you into a new war zone, and this game does everything to make you feel completely unhinged. There's no upbeat music, there's no flashy explosions, just disturbing, droning sounds that make you feel like you're trapped in some kind of fever dream. The junkyard. You're literally fighting people in a trash heap. This place is a maze of scrap metal and horror. The train yard. You'll start noticing the difficulty skyrockets here. More enemies, tighter space, and barely any cover. And then we get to the elementary school. The most controversial level, the elementary school. This, right here, this is the level that made people really mad. The Postal devs did something very intentional here. They knew that putting a school in a game like this would push buttons. The level has armed security, meaning the game never actually forces you to shoot innocent children. But the implication was enough. This level was one of the biggest reasons the game was pulled from stores in certain regions. It was seen as a glorification of real-world violence after the Columbine tragedy in 1999. Postal was thrown into the conversation alongside Doom, Quake, and Grand Theft Auto as a game that supposedly inspired real-life violence. Was that fair? Probably not. Was this level included to be provocative? Absolutely. Running with Scissors was fully aware of what they were doing, the Air Force Base. After all of the chaos, all of the bloodshed, and all of the messed up things you've done in this game, you finally reach the last level, a heavily guarded military base. And this is where the twist happens. Just as you reach the end of the final objective, your character collapses. The game cuts to black, and we get a final eerie scene. The Postal dude is in a mental hospital. A doctor stands over him. He's been restrained, sedated. And then, the end. That's right. The game wasn't about some unstoppable murder machine. It was the delusions of a deeply disturbed individual. But here's the thing. This ending didn't make people forgive the game. If anything, it made it even more controversial. Because instead of a fun, mindless shooter, Postal became a game that felt too real for comfort. And somehow, despite all of that, it was just the beginning. Now, this is where Postal became the legend we know today. Unlike the first game, Postal 2 is a first-person, open-world sandbox of pure insanity. You play as the Postal dude, just trying to live his life in a filthy, crime-ridden town. It's all up to you how violent or peaceful you want to be. You can go through the game without killing anyone, or you can go full psycho and turn the town into an apocalyptic nightmare. Also, you can pee on people for reasons. This game is offensive, dumb, and absolutely hilarious. You wake up in your trailer greeted by your lovely, horrible wife, who immediately gives you a to-do list.
When you're done screwing around, I made a list of errands for you on the fridge.
Jesus, woman.
Your errands for the day? Get milk, cash your paycheck, and pick up a paycheck. Sounds simple, right? No, of course it's not. Of course it's not.
So that's what that smells like.
Since you can complete these tasks in any way you want to, I'm just going to be using gameplay footage from my playthrough that I played for this video. Alright, so I've got my errands list. Simple tasks. Totally normal. Nothing should go wrong. First stop, the grocery store. I just need to grab some milk. I could wait in the insanely long line like a law-abiding citizen, or I could unleash hellfire upon this entire building. The customers are running for their lives, and I'm standing there, like, yeah. But here's the best part. I still pay for the milk, because hey, I might be a psychopath, but I'm not a thief. Oh great. They're mad about video games, because of course they are. Naturally, I decide to prove their point and paint the street red. Limbs are flying, people are screaming, and then I just set the rest of them on fire. You know, as a little bonus. I walk away from what used to be a protest and continue. Finally, I get to the office. The guy has been riding my back for months, and today, I've had enough. I just turn around, grab my paycheck, and stroll out. Unfortunately for me, the protesters are back. They must have heard what I did and decided they wanted a second helping. Well, if that's what they want, that's what they get. I unload on them, mowing them down one by one. Then, I go cash my check. I would wait in line, but that's way too big of a commitment, so I just decide to rob the bank instead.
Mission accomplished with extreme prejudice. Time to head home.
Did you go by work?
Yeah, apparently I'm on sabbatical or something.
Well, good. Maybe you can get a few more things done for me.
I'm gonna do a few things to you, woman.
What was that?
Nothing, dear. Enjoy your milk.
Welcome to Tuesday. Our objectives for this day is to confess our sins, get signatures for our petition, return a book, and get Gary's autograph. As I watch the marching band march by, it reminds me of when I played Postal literally one day ago. But not wanting to look like an insane individual, I leave them alone. I watch them march, and they all get blown up anyway. I mean, seriously, I literally didn't do anything. Getting the signatures for the petition is surprisingly easy, and I completed the objective while making my way 2, the library. Here we get to see more protesters, but these are even worse. They want to burn the entire library down. So as soon as I finish returning my book, of course, the library is up in flames and I have to escape. I manage to make it out, and I make my way to the mall to get Gary's signature. I have to say, it could have gone a lot smoother. I did not initiate any violence this time, but since they were attacking the sacred Gary, I had to step in, and I ended up in a shootout with Gary, with the police. But I have to say, the autograph made it worth it. Next is one of the most controversial missions in the entire game. You end up going to a church to confess your sins, but of course, I couldn't stand waiting in line and ended up just not doing it. So, naturally, the entire place gets attacked by the Taliban. Yeah, of course. This game is completely unhinged. After making my way out, we make it to Wednesday.
Did you get Gary Coleman's autograph? I can get a small fortune for it on eBay.
Right, a small fortune. Say, aren't those things more valuable after the person is, deceased?
Yes. Why?
We were there on the day that will live in infamy.
Postal 2 came out when America was still reeling from the 9/11 attacks. It was a time of fear, anger, and intense patriotism. So when this game came along with terrorist attacks and suicide bombers, yeah, people were furious. This game wasn't some accidental controversy. It was deliberate. The devs wanted people to be outraged. They wanted Postal 2 to be the game your parents, politicians, and the media lost their minds over. And it worked. News outlets ripped the game apart. Politicians called for bans. And in some countries, it actually did get banned. Even the US military got involved. The Pentagon reportedly reviewed the game because of how it portrayed terrorism. Postal 2 wasn't just offensive. It was a middle finger to every moral panic surrounding the video game industry at the time. Here's the thing. Unlike Postal 1, Postal 2 lets you choose how to play. You don't have to commit murder. You don't have to burn protesters alive. You don't have to do, well, anything violent. You can just run errands like a normal dude. But let's be real. No one actually plays the game like that. Postal 2 was designed to push you to the edge, to see how far you'd go before you finally snapped. And that's why, even 20 plus years later, it's still legendary. By this point, you're either playing Postal 2 like a normal human being, or you've fully embraced the chaos. And Wednesday's to-do list, yeah, it's gonna test your limits. Today's errands. Desecrate a corpse. Vote. And get a Christmas tree. Sounds simple, right? It's never that simple. By Wednesday, it's clear. Postal 2 isn't just a violent game. It's a comedy game, disguised as a violent game. Every errand starts off normal and spirals into absolute madness. And that's what makes it brilliant. One of the most unique things about Postal 2 is how the game is structured. Instead of a traditional mission-based setup, you're given a to-do list. On paper, it sounds boring. Pick up milk, vote, get a paycheck. But in reality, it's absolute chaos. You could just walk in, do your errands peacefully, and go home. Or you could burn down a grocery store, fight off a SWAT team, and leave a trail of destruction everywhere you go. The game doesn't tell you how to play. It just lets you figure out how much of a menace you want to be. The AI in Postal 2 is something else. It's not smart, but it sure is entertaining. You can walk down the street and watch random fights break out for absolutely no reason. A dude might pull a gun on another guy because he bumped into him. two people just started slapping the hell out of each other while you're casually picking up milk. And the best part, if the cops are around, they'll actually try to stop the crimes. Sometimes even ignoring your chaos if there's something more urgent going on. It's this weird, janky, unpredictable mess that somehow makes the world feel more alive than it has any right to. People say games today don't take risks anymore. And looking back at Postal 2, yeah, I can see why. There's no way something like this would get made now. One thing Postal 2 absolutely nails is its variety in the most ridiculous ways possible. Sure, you've got your standard arsenal, pistols, shotguns, machine guns, but that's not what makes this game special. No, the real fun starts when you get creative. You've got a can of gasoline that lets you set up some of the most hilarious chain reactions possible. Pour a line of gas, light a match, and watch the entire street turn into Mad Max in seconds. Or, if you're feeling extra gross, you can use diseased cow heads to infect entire crowds of people, making them puke their guts out right before they drop dead. The fact that this is an actual strategy you can use in combat is insane. Then there's the classic shovel. Normally you'd think, it's just a melee weapon, whatever. But Postal 2 doesn't do normal. You can literally knock people's heads off, clean off with it, then kick their severed heads around like a soccer ball. And why? Because why not? The game doesn't ask questions, and at this point, neither should we. Most people focus on how Postal 2 offends everyone, but what is it actually making fun of? Small town America and consumer culture. The entire town is full of stereotypes taken to the extreme. Bureaucratic nonsense, rude customers, aggressive protesters. It satirizes everyday frustrations that people actually deal with. The protesters are just as violent as the things they claim to be against. It's a critique of how outrage culture often turns people into what they're fighting against. The over-the-top violence was a direct middle finger to the idea that games cause real-world violence. It doesn't say violence is good or bad, it just turns the argument into a joke. In Postal 1, Postal Dude was a psychotic, silent killer. The game framed him like a disturbed lone wolf murderer. In Postal 2, he's just some dude trying to run errands. How does this character shift affect the tone of the game? Instead of being the villain, he's just reacting to an insane world. Compare it to how Rockstar handles protagonists. Trevor in GTA 5 is Postal Dude, if he had a bigger budget. This game was made in a completely different era. Could a game this reckless and offensive be released today? Probably not. Why? The gaming industry has changed. Indie devs take risks, but AAA publishers avoid controversy. Would a modern version of Postal lose its edge? Or could it still work in today's world, just in a different way? Most people dismiss Postal 2 as just a dumb, offensive game. And yeah, it is. But there's something more beneath the insanity. Whether intentional or not, Postal 2 is one of the most unique and unpredictable games ever made. It lets players create their own chaos, it mocks everything in sight, and it refuses to take itself seriously. And in an industry where games are becoming more scripted, controlled, and predictable, Postal 2 stands as a reminder of what happens when developers don't give a damn and let the player do whatever they want.
A Christmas tree! I can't wait to decorate it.
Yeah, it was pretty cheap since it's July and all.
Well, I hope you voted today. Your choices will affect the future.
You don't say.
What was that?
I said, do we have any beer? I worked up a killer thirst today.
Postal 4 exists. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, well, that's what we're here to figure out. Released in early access in 2019 and fully launched in 2022, this game had some big shoes to fill. Blood-soaked shoes. Postal became a cult classic. Postal 3 was an absolute train wreck, and Postal 4, well, it promised to be a return to form. But did it actually live up to Postal 2? The game begins with Postal Dude and Champ losing everything. Their trailer gets stolen and now they're broke, homeless, and stuck in Edenson, a brand new open world hellhole. Right away, the game throws you into its trademark nonsense. The first objective, find a job, because even a lunatic has bills to pay. This game makes it clear that it's not holding back. It's Postal, through and through, offensive, ridiculous, and constantly throwing bizarre situations at you. This game basically completely avoided any backlash, unlike Postal 1 and Postal 2, making it not super controversial compared to the previous games. Although the game came out very buggy, very glitchy, and there's still complaints on performance now to this day. One of the biggest problems with Postal 3 is the Postal Dude felt off. The voice was wrong, the writing was forced, and the game was a painful experience. In Postal 4, Rick Hunter, the original voice of the Postal Dude. The game might have had issues, but this is the Postal Dude we wanted. The weapons in Postal 4 are completely chaotic and over the top, but some of them lacked impact. Postal 2 had that janky yet satisfying feel to its combat. Postal 4 sometimes feel like the weapons don't have enough weight. This game is sometimes janky, but here's the thing. Postal games have always been janky. The difference? Postal 2's jank felt hilarious, while Postal 4's jank can sometimes feel frustrating and unfinished. Postal has always been offensive, satirical, and completely insane. But the big question is, does Postal 4's humor land? The game roasts everything, just like Postal 2. The Postal Dude's one-liners are pretty good. Some missions are so absurd they're brilliant, and some jokes feel forced or outdated, like they're trying too hard to be edgy. The satire is all over the place, sometimes sharp, sometimes just random nonsense. Some moments feel like they're just trying to shock you for the sake of it, rather than actually being funny. But the humor doesn't always have the same bite as Postal 2. What Postal 4 gets wrong is that it feels unfinished and buggy. The open world lacks the chaos of Postal 2. The combat feels a little weak, and some of the humor feels forced or outdated. If you're a hardcore Postal fan, you'll still find this game enjoyable. But if you're expecting a perfect polished return to Postal 2's glory days, you might be disappointed. Postal Brain Damaged is basically just Doom, but Postal themed. Unlike the usual open world mayhem of the mainline Postal games, Postal Brain Damage is a fast-paced, old-school arena shooter that throws you into a completely deranged fever dream of Postal Dude's mind. It's weird, intense, and somehow one of the best Postal games ever made. Instead of being a down-on-his-luck lunatic causing havoc in a small town, Postal Dude is now down on his luck, lost in his own mind. The game starts with Postal Dude collapsing in front of his TV, although this is just a kind of like a spin-off game. The Postal franchise is a one-of-a-kind series that somehow survived outrage, controversy, bad reviews, and even its own terrible sequels. From its violent and disturbing origins in 1997 to Postal 2, redefining what a sandbox shooter could be, to Postal 3, we don't talk about Postal 3. This series has been through hell and back. Even when the gaming industry moved on, when critics called it the worst thing ever, when it looked like Postal was dead, Running with Scissors just kept going. And somehow, against all odds, Postal 4 and Postal Brain Damaged prove that this series still has a place in gaming for pure, stupid, and unapologetic chaos. It's not just about violence for the sake of violence, it's about freedom and comedy. To do whatever you want in this game without somebody telling you it's not allowed. It's a reminder that games don't always have to be serious, deep, or politically correct. Sometimes they just need to be fun, stupid, offensive, and over the top. And in a world where every game tries to be safe, clean, and corporate, Postal stands alone as a middle finger to the gaming industry. So what's next? Honestly, who knows? Maybe Postal 5 will happen. Maybe Running with Scissors will just keep updating Postal 4 forever. Maybe we'll just get a weird, unexpected spin-off like Postal Brain Damage. But one thing's certain. As long as there's pissing mechanics, excessive violence, and bad taste humor, Postal will never die. And that's it. I've officially played every single Postal game made by Running with Scissors, from the brutal, eerie chaos of Postal 1, to the legendary, over-the-top sandbox of Postal 2, to the absolute train wreck that was Postal 3, which thankfully wasn't made by Running with Scissors, and finally to the modern madness of Postal 4 and Postal Brain Damaged. This video took a ridiculous amount of time to put together. Hours of footage, so much editing, and probably a few brain cells lost along the way. So if you made it this far, thank you. Whether you just clicked on the video out of curiosity or you stuck around for the whole thing, I appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing, because after playing every Postal game made by Running with Scissors, who knows what kind of madness I'll dive into next. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.